Asa, my name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. 3 years ago, I married the love of my life, David, thinking I was gaining not just a husband, but a whole new family who would embrace me with open arms. I spent countless hours trying to win over my mother-in-law, Margaret, baking her favorite cookies, remembering every special occasion, and always being the perfect daughter-in-law. But last month, everything changed when I discovered their secret plan for Margaret's 58th birthday celebration, and what I did next shocked everyone, including myself. Before we dive into this incredible story of family drama and sweet revenge, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever felt excluded by your in-laws, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story has a twist ending that will leave you cheering. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this whole situation unfolded. David and I met 4 years ago at our old marketing firm in downtown Portland, Oregon. He was the quiet, dependable accountant who worked 2 floors up from my department, and I was the outgoing marketing coordinator who always organized the office parties and social events. Our romance began slowly built on shared coffee breaks and late-night conversations about our dreams for the future. When David finally introduced me to his family 6 months into our relationship, I was determined to make the perfect first impression. The Harper family lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in the suburbs, complete with Margaret's prized rose garden that she tended every morning before her job as a high school principal. Robert, David's father, was a gentleman who worked as an electrical contractor and spent his weekends restoring classic cars in their immaculate garage. Margaret was everything I had expected from David's descriptions, polished and proper, with silver hair always perfectly styled, and clothes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. She had raised David and his older sister Jessica to value tradition, hard work, and family loyalty above all else. Jessica had followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a successful lawyer at a prestigious downtown firm, and she lived just 20 minutes away with her architect husband and their twin boys. From that first dinner, I sensed an invisible barrier between Margaret and me that I couldn't quite identify. She was polite, asking appropriate questions about my work and background, but there was a coolness in her eyes that made me feel like I was being evaluated rather than welcomed. When I complimented her pot roast, she smiled tightly and mentioned that it was David's grandmother's recipe, implying a family heritage I could never be part of. The differences between us were subtle but persistent. Margaret came from old Portland money, her family having owned a successful lumber business for 3 generations. She spoke with the refined accent of someone who had attended private schools and exclusive social clubs. I, on the other hand, grew up in a middle-class family where my dad worked at the post office and my mum was a nurse. We were loving and loud, celebrating everything with enthusiasm and accepting everyone who walked through our door. Despite the underlying tension, I threw myself into winning Margaret's approval with the determination of someone who genuinely wanted to belong. I researched her favorite authors and brought her first edition books for her birthday. I learnt to make her grandmother's apple pie recipe, spending hours getting the lattice crust just right. When she mentioned missing the lavender sachets her deceased mother used to make, I spent an entire weekend crafting identical ones with lavender from my own garden. David appreciated my efforts, but seemed oblivious to his mother's subtle resistance to our relationship. When I mentioned feeling like Margaret didn't quite approve of me, he would laugh and say I was being too sensitive, that his mother just needed time to warm up to new people. He had grown up as the golden boy who could do no wrong in Margaret's eyes, so he couldn't imagine that his choice in partners might be subject to her criticism. Our wedding 3 years ago was beautiful, but revealed the first major crack in my relationship with the Harper family. Margaret insisted on handling most of the planning, citing her experience with social events and her extensive network of vendors. While I appreciated her help, every decision became a negotiation where my preferences were diplomatically overruled in favor of what was more appropriate or more elegant, according to Harper family standards. The guest list became a particular source of tension. Margaret wanted to invite her entire social circle, people I had never met, who she claimed were family friends that needed to be included. When I suggested reducing the guest count to make room for more of my college friends, she looked genuinely hurt and explained that these people had watched David grow up and would be offended not to be invited to his wedding. Our honeymoon period with the family lasted about 6 months after the wedding. During that time, Margaret seemed to make an effort to include me in family traditions and holiday celebrations. She taught me how to make her famous Christmas cookies, a recipe that had been passed down through 4 generations of Harper women. She invited me to join her weekly bridge club, introducing me as David's wife, with what seemed like genuine pride. But gradually, the invitations became less frequent, and the conversations became more strained. Margaret would make comments about how different things were in her day when discussing everything from career priorities to housekeeping standards. When David and I bought our first home together, a modest craftsman bungalow that we were renovating room by room, Margaret's visits always included suggestions about what we should change to make it more suitable for entertaining. The planning for Margaret's 58th birthday celebration began 2 months in advance, and I was determined to make it the most memorable celebration she had ever experienced. This felt like my opportunity to finally prove that I belonged in the Harper family, that I could organize something elegant and meaningful that would show Margaret how much I cared about her and respected her place in David's life. I started by researching the most exclusive restaurants in Portland, looking for a venue that would match Margaret's sophisticated tastes and provide the perfect backdrop for a milestone birthday celebration. After visiting 6 different establishments, I settled on Le Bernardin, a French restaurant downtown that had recently earned a James Beard Award. The private dining room overlooked the river with floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers that created exactly the elegant atmosphere I knew Margaret would appreciate. The menu planning became an obsession for me. I met with the head chef 3 times discussing Margaret's dietary preferences, her favourite flavours and the type of presentation that would make the evening feel truly special. We designed a 7-course tasting menu featuring Pacific Northwest ingredients, prepared with classic French techniques, each course paired with carefully selected wines from local vineyards that Margaret had mentioned enjoying. I spent hours on the phone with the restaurant's event coordinator, discussing every detail from the table linens to the floral arrangements. Margaret loved peonies, so I arranged for the centerpieces to feature white and pink peonies, even though they were out of season and cost a fortune to import. The place cards were hand-lettered by a calligrapher, and I had the menu cards printed on cream-coloured paper with gold embossing. The guest list included 12 people: Margaret and Robert Jessica and her husband Thomas, their twin boys, who were now 10 years old, David's aunt Patricia and Uncle James, who lived in Seattle, Margaret's best friend Eleanor from her bridge club, and David's cousin Michael, who was visiting from San Francisco. I coordinated with everyone about timing dietary restrictions and transportation needs, wanting every aspect of the evening to flow seamlessly. For Margaret's gift, I spent weeks searching antique shops and estate sales until I found a perfect pearl necklace from the 1930s, similar to one she had shown me in old family photographs that had belonged to David's great-grandmother. The necklace cost more than I typically spent on gifts, but I wanted to give her something that would show how much thought I had put into understanding what would truly mean something to her. I arranged for a professional photographer to capture the evening booking, someone who specialized in elegant family portraits and understood how to work discreetly during dinner service. I imagined Margaret's delight when she received a beautiful album of photos from the celebration, something she could treasure and show to her friends for years to come. The dress I chose for the occasion was navy blue, Margaret's favorite color, from a boutique that specialized in classic sophisticated styles. I made appointments for my hair and nails, wanting to look polished and appropriate for the upscale venue. Every detail was planned with Margaret's preferences in mind, from the timing of the dinner to the selection of after-dinner cordials. 2 weeks before the celebration, I created beautiful invitation cards with watercolor borders and elegant typography, hand-delivering them to local family members and mailing them to those who lived out of town. Each invitation included details about the restaurant parking information and a note about the dress code to ensure everyone felt prepared for the sophisticated venue. The anticipation was building beautifully. Jessica had called to thank me for organizing such a thoughtful celebration, and Robert had mentioned how excited Margaret was about the upcoming dinner. David seemed proud of the effort I was putting into his mother's birthday, finally seeing concrete evidence of how much his family meant to me. I felt like I was finally going to achieve the acceptance I had been seeking for 3 years. This celebration would be my gift to Margaret, but also my proof that I understood the Harper family values and could create the kind of elegant, memorable occasions that they appreciated. The evening was going to be perfect, and I was counting down the days until I could see Margaret's face light up with surprise and gratitude. The discovery that shattered my carefully constructed plans happened purely by accident in the most mundane way possible. I had finished a morning client meeting early and decided to surprise David with lunch at his office, something I did occasionally when my schedule allowed. I stopped at the deli he loved and picked up his favorite sandwich, planning to eat together in the small conference room where he sometimes took his lunch breaks. When I arrived at his accounting firm, David was on a phone call that sounded like it was winding down, so I waited in the hallway outside his office door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his voice carried clearly through the thin walls, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "I know, Jessica, I feel terrible about it too." David was saying, his tone apologetic and strained, but Mom was really specific about wanting just immediate family this year. She said she's getting older and wants a more intimate celebration with just the people who matter most to her. My heart started racing as I realized they were talking about Margaret's birthday, the celebration I had spent 2 months planning down to every detail. I pressed closer to the door, needing to hear more, but hoping I was misunderstanding the conversation. "The reservation is for 7 tomorrow night at Riverside Bistro," David continued. "Mom specifically chose that place because she said it feels more like home, more comfortable for a real family gathering. She doesn't want anything too fancy or formal this year." The sandwich I was holding suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Riverside Bistro was a casual family restaurant across town, the kind of place where they served comfort food on mismatched plates and children could colour on the paper tablecloths. It was the complete opposite of the elegant French restaurant where I had reserved the private dining room, ordered the 7-course tasting menu, and arranged for imported peonies. "I just don't know how to tell Sarah," David was saying, and the guilt in his voice confirmed my worst fears. "She's put so much work into planning this other dinner, and she's so excited about it. But you know how Mum gets when she's made up her mind about something. She was really clear that she wants this to be just us tomorrow night." I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the paper bag containing David's lunch, as the full implications of what I was hearing sank in. Not only had Margaret and Jessica planned a separate celebration without including me, but David had known about it and hadn't told me. While I was spending my savings on imported flowers and vintage pearls, his family was making reservations at a casual restaurant for a dinner that specifically excluded me. The phrase "just immediate family" echoed in my mind like a slap. After 3 years of marriage, after all my efforts to be accepted and included, Margaret still didn't consider me immediate family. I was the outsider, the addition that could be left behind when they wanted a real family gathering. When David finally ended his phone call and opened his office door, he found me standing there with tears streaming down my face and his lunch growing cold in my hands. The look of shock and then guilt that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know about how long he had been keeping this secret. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, but the words sounded hollow and rehearsed, like he had been practicing what he would say if I found out. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been planning to go to dinner with your family while I sit at home wondering why no one showed up to the celebration I organised?" David's face crumpled as he realised how devastating this betrayal was. "Mom called last week and said she wanted something simple this year, just the immediate family. I tried to talk her into including you, but she was really insistent. She said she needed this one night to just be with her children and grandchildren." The explanation made everything worse, not better. Margaret hadn't simply forgotten to invite me or failed to communicate about a change of plans. She had specifically requested my exclusion, and David had agreed to it without fighting for me or even giving me the courtesy of an honest conversation about what was happening. Standing in that office hallway, holding a lunch I no longer wanted to share, I realised that my 3-year effort to become part of the Harper family had been not just unsuccessful, but actively rejected. Margaret had made her feelings clear through her actions, and David had chosen his mother's comfort over his wife's inclusion. The elegant birthday celebration I had planned was about to become a very expensive monument to my own naive hope that I could earn my place in a family that had never intended to accept me. The drive home from David's office was a blur of rage, hurt, and rapidly forming plans. My initial instinct was to call Margaret directly and confront her about the exclusion, but as I sat in my car in our driveway, a different idea began to take shape. If the Harper family wanted to exclude me from their intimate celebration, they were certainly entitled to do that. But they were not entitled to use the reservation I had paid for the flowers I had ordered or the photographer I had hired. I spent the afternoon researching the cancellation policies for every vendor I had contracted for Margaret's birthday celebration. The private dining room at Le Bernardin had a 48-hour cancellation policy, But since I was calling with more than 24 hours' notice, I could cancel without losing the entire deposit. The florist was more flexible, allowing me to redirect the peony arrangements to a different event or recipient. The photographer was the most understanding when I explained that there had been a change in family circumstances that required cancelling the evening session. Professional event photographers deal with family drama regularly, and he simply moved our appointment to his backup list, without asking for details about why a birthday celebration had been called off. But cancelling everything felt like only half a solution to the problem I was facing. The Harper family had made their choice to exclude me, and I wanted them to understand the full consequences of that decision. They could have their intimate family dinner at Riverside Bistro, but they were going to discover exactly what they had given up by choosing to leave me out of their celebration. Instead of simply cancelling the reservation at Le Bernardin, I decided to transform it into something completely different. I called my parents, my sister Amanda, and my 3 closest friends from college, explaining that I had a beautiful dinner reservation that I didn't want to waste, and inviting them to join me for an impromptu celebration of my own. My parents were confused but delighted by the invitation to dine at such an elegant restaurant. Amanda immediately understood that something was wrong and offered to bring her husband and their new baby, turning the dinner into a multi-generational family celebration. My college friends were thrilled by the opportunity to dress up and enjoy fine dining together, something we rarely had the chance to do in our busy adult lives. The professional photographer was equally happy to redirect his services to capturing my celebration instead of Margaret's. When I explained that I wanted to document an evening with people who truly valued my company, he seemed to understand the subtext and promised to create beautiful portraits that would commemorate the occasion. I called the restaurant's event coordinator and explained that there had been a change in the guest of honor, but that the celebration would proceed exactly as planned. The 7-course tasting menu, the imported peonies, the hand-lettered place cards, and the vintage wine pairings would now serve as the backdrop for an evening with people who actually wanted to be there with me. The satisfaction of taking control of the situation was immediate and intoxicating. Instead of sitting at home feeling sorry for myself while David attended his family's exclusive dinner, I would be surrounded by love, laughter, and genuine appreciation. The money I had spent on creating an elegant celebration would still result in a beautiful evening, just not the one I had originally intended. That evening, I carefully composed a group text message to Margaret, Robert, Jessica, and David, informing them that the dinner reservation at Le Bernardin had been cancelled due to a scheduling conflict. I didn't mention the alternative dinner they had planned, didn't accuse them of excluding me, and didn't express any anger or hurt in the message. I simply stated that the private dining room would no longer be available for Margaret's birthday celebration. The responses came within minutes. First confusion, then panic, then a flurry of phone calls between family members, trying to understand what had happened and whether they could somehow salvage the elegant celebration they had apparently assumed would still be available to them as a backup plan. David called me repeatedly, but I let his calls go to voicemail while I focused on preparing for my own dinner. I took a long bath, did my hair and makeup with extra care, and put on the navy blue dress I had chosen specifically for Margaret's birthday. If I was going to have my photograph taken at an elegant restaurant, I was going to look absolutely stunning doing it. The evening of what should have been Margaret's birthday celebration became one of the most satisfying nights of my entire life. My family and friends arrived at Le Bernardin dressed to the nines, excited about the surprise dinner and curious about the circumstances that had led to such an elegant impromptu celebration. The private dining room looked absolutely spectacular, exactly as I had envisioned it for Margaret's birthday. My parents were amazed by the restaurant's sophistication and the thoughtfulness of every detail I had arranged. The imported peonies drew gasps of admiration from everyone, and the hand-lettered place cards made each guest feel truly special. Amanda took dozens of photos with her phone before the professional photographer even arrived, documenting the beautiful table setting and the joy on everyone's faces. The 7-course tasting menu was even more incredible than I had hoped. Each dish was a work of art beautifully presented and perfectly prepared by the award-winning kitchen staff. The wine pairings enhanced every flavour, and the service was impeccable, with servers who treated our celebration with the same attention and respect they would have given to any other special occasion. During the 3rd course, I stood up to make a toast to the people gathered around the table. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," I said, my voice clear and confident. This dinner was originally planned as a gift for someone who didn't value what I was offering, Instead, it has become a celebration of the people who truly matter in my life, the people who choose to include me and support me and love me exactly as I am. The professional photographer captured the moment perfectly, preserving the genuine smiles and emotional connection that filled the room. These were people who had dropped everything to join me for an evening they didn't fully understand, simply because I had asked them to be there. The contrast with the Harper family's selective invitation list was stark and painful, but also liberating. Meanwhile, across town at Riverside Bistro, Margaret's birthday celebration was proceeding without the elegant touches that would have made it memorable. David later told me that the family had spent the first hour of their dinner trying to understand what had happened to the Le Bernardin reservation and whether there was any way to transfer their party to the more upscale venue. Jessica had called the restaurant directly using her lawyer voice to demand information about the cancellation and whether the private dining room might still be available for their party. The hostess politely explained that the room was currently occupied by another celebration and could not be reassigned, leading to a series of increasingly frustrated phone calls between the Harper family members. Margaret, according to David's later account, had been devastated by the realization that her elegant birthday dinner had evaporated. She had apparently been looking forward to the sophisticated celebration more than she had admitted, and the casual atmosphere of Riverside Bistro felt like a significant downgrade from what she had been anticipating. The family spent their dinner speculating about why I had cancelled the reservation and whether there was any way to reschedule the elegant celebration for a different date. David's phone buzzed constantly with my ignored calls, and his distraction cast a shadow over what was supposed to be a joyful family gathering. Robert, who had been looking forward to the professional photography session, kept asking when they might be able to arrange something similar, not understanding that the photographer had been redirected to my celebration and was currently taking stunning portraits of my chosen family, laughing and enjoying themselves in the private dining room they had given up. By the end of the evening, my dinner party had become a celebration that none of us would ever forget. The professional photographs captured genuine joy and connection. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the carefully selected wines, and everyone agreed that it had been one of the most memorable dinners of their lives. We lingered over coffee and dessert, nobody wanting the magical evening to end. The Harper family's dinner, in contrast, ended early and awkwardly, with Margaret tearful about her ruined birthday plans, and David anxious about his unanswered phone calls. They went home disappointed and confused, having learned too late that excluding me from their celebration meant losing access to the elegant evening I had created for them. The confrontation I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure erupted the moment David walked through our front door at 10:30 that night. I was still glowing from the success of my dinner party, carefully hanging up my navy dress and removing the professional makeup that had looked so perfect in the photographs. The contrast between my satisfaction and David's obvious distress was immediately apparent. "What the hell did you do tonight, Sarah?" David demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and panic that I had never heard before. "My mother is crying in her bedroom, Jessica is talking about legal action over the deposit money, and you won't answer your phone to explain what happened." I turned to face him calmly, still riding the high of an evening spent with people who genuinely valued my company. I had dinner with my family and friends in the private dining room I reserved and paid for. I said simply, "The same reservation your family decided they didn't want to be part of." The colour drained from David's face as he realised I had known about their secret dinner plans. "You knew about Mom's dinner at Riverside Bistro," he said, the words coming out like an admission of guilt rather than a question. "I heard you talking to Jessica about your intimate family celebration that specifically excluded me," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the hurt that was still fresh beneath my anger. "You all made your choice about who counts as immediate family, and I made my choice about what to do with the celebration I had planned." David sank into our living room chair, suddenly looking exhausted rather than angry. "Mum was really specific about wanting just blood family this year. She said she needed one birthday where she could just be with her children and grandchildren without having to worry about including anyone else." The phrase "anyone else" hit me like a physical blow, even though I had been preparing myself for this conversation all evening. After 3 years of marriage, I was still anyone else to Margaret. Still the outsider who required special accommodation rather than automatic inclusion. "And you agreed to that?" I asked, genuinely curious about how my husband had justified excluding his wife from a family celebration. You thought it was reasonable for your mother to plan a birthday dinner that deliberately left me out. David's defense crumbled as he tried to explain his position. I was going to talk to you about it, but I knew you'd be hurt, and I didn't want to ruin all the work you'd put into planning her other dinner. I thought maybe we could do both. That you could have your elegant celebration, and Mum could have her family time. The assumption that I would simply accept being excluded from the real family celebration while hosting my own separate dinner party revealed how little David understood about what I actually wanted from his family. I didn't want to buy their acceptance with expensive restaurants and imported flowers. I wanted to be considered part of the family automatically, without having to earn my place at every gathering. My phone started ringing with calls from Margaret, then Jessica, then Robert, each family member demanding explanations and apologies in increasingly hysterical voicemails. I listened to each message on speaker while David sat in our living room, his head in his hands, as he heard his family's reactions to my actions. Margaret's voicemails progressed from tearful confusion to indignant outrage. "How could you be so vindictive and selfish?" she sobbed in one message. "You ruined my birthday celebration out of spite. And now Jessica says we might lose the deposit money we already paid. I never expected this kind of behavior from someone David chose to marry." Jessica's messages were more threatening, delivered in the sharp tone she used in her legal practice. "What you did tonight constitutes theft of services and breach of contract," she announced in one voicemail. "We're prepared to take legal action to recover the money you wasted on your petty revenge dinner. This behavior is completely unacceptable, and you owe our family a sincere apology." Robert's single message was the most devastating because it was the most disappointed. "Sarah, I don't understand what happened tonight or why you felt you had to hurt Margaret like this on her birthday. She's been crying for hours and I've never seen her so upset. I hope you can find it in your heart to make this right somehow." David looked up at me with pleading eyes as the voicemails ended. "Sarah, please, you have to fix this. My mother is devastated and the whole family thinks you did this out of pure spite. Can't you just apologize and maybe we can plan another celebration to make up for tonight?" The request for an apology crystallized everything that was wrong with our family dynamic. I was being asked to apologize for excluding people who had specifically chosen to exclude me, for spending my own money on a celebration with people who actually wanted my company, for refusing to accept being treated as a second-class family member. "I'm not apologizing for valuing myself," I said firmly, surprised by how strong and clear my voice sounded. "Your family made it clear that I'm not immediate family, that I'm just someone who can be left out when they want real intimacy." I accepted that message and acted accordingly. If they're upset by the consequences of their choice, that's something they need to examine, not something I need to fix. The week that followed Margaret's birthday became a cold war in our household, with David sleeping in the guest bedroom, and communication between us reduced to necessary logistics about schedules and household responsibilities. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable, but also strangely peaceful after months of trying to navigate the complex dynamics of Harper family politics. I spent my days focusing on my freelance graphic design work, throwing myself into projects with the kind of concentration that comes from having fewer emotional distractions. Without the constant background stress of wondering whether I was meeting Margaret's approval or successfully integrating into David's family, I found myself more creative and productive than I had been in months. The professional photographs from my dinner party arrived via email, and they were absolutely stunning. The photographer had captured the genuine joy and connection around that table, the elegant details I had planned so carefully, and the radiant happiness on my face as I celebrated with people who truly valued my presence. I ordered prints of several photos, planning to frame them as a reminder of what it felt like to be surrounded by unconditional love. Margaret and Jessica's campaign to make me apologize intensified throughout the week. They enlisted various family members to call and express disappointment in my behavior, creating a coordinated effort to pressure me into admitting wrongdoing and making amends. Aunt Patricia called from Seattle to say how shocked she was by my vindictive behavior, and Cousin Michael left a voicemail expressing his disbelief that I would hurt an elderly woman on her birthday. The most painful call came from Eleanor, Margaret's best friend from Bridge Club, who had been invited to the original Le Bernardin celebration. "I was so looking forward to seeing Margaret honoured with such an elegant party," Eleanor said sadly. "She talks about you so often, dear, and she was so excited about the celebration you had planned. I can't understand why you would take that away from her." The irony of Eleanor's call was crushing. Margaret had been excited about and looking forward to the elegant celebration, just not to celebrating it with me. She had wanted the sophistication and beauty I could create, but she hadn't wanted the person who was creating it. The cognitive dissonance of rejecting me while expecting to benefit from my efforts revealed the fundamental selfishness of the Harper family's position. David's attempts to mediate the situation were half-hearted and ineffective. He would suggest compromises like me paying for another elegant dinner to make up for the birthday celebration, or me writing a letter explaining my feelings to help his family understand my perspective. Every suggestion placed the burden of reconciliation on me, while asking nothing of his family in terms of examining their own behavior. "Can't you see that this is tearing our family apart?" David asked during one of our few conversations that week. "Mom is still crying every day. Jessica is talking about cutting off contact with us, and Dad doesn't know what to say to anyone. All of this could be fixed if you would just acknowledge that what you did was wrong. But I couldn't acknowledge wrongdoing that I didn't feel, and I wouldn't apologize for finally standing up for myself after years of accepting scraps of inclusion." The Harper family's reaction to my boundaries revealed exactly how they viewed my role in their lives. I was supposed to provide services and benefits, while accepting whatever level of inclusion they were willing to offer, with no right to expect reciprocal consideration. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Robert, who had been the most disappointed by my actions, appeared at my front door on Friday afternoon while David was at work. He looked tired and older than I had ever seen him, and he asked if he could come in for a conversation that was long overdue. "I need to understand what happened," he said, simply settling into our living room chair with the weary posture of someone carrying a heavy burden. "Margaret is heartbroken, Jessica is furious, and David is miserable. But I keep thinking there must be more to this story than what I'm hearing from everyone else." For the first time since the birthday disaster, someone from David's family was asking for my perspective rather than demanding an apology. The relief of being heard was overwhelming, and I found myself telling Robert everything: the years of subtle exclusion, the pattern of my needs being secondary to Harper family preferences, and the devastating realization that after 3 years of marriage, I was still considered an outsider who could be excluded when they wanted real family time. Robert listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled as I described incident after incident of being made to feel like a tolerated guest rather than a family member. When I finished, he sat in silence for several minutes, processing what he had heard, and perhaps comparing it to his own observations of family dynamics over the past 3 years. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, his voice heavy with regret. "I've watched Margaret treat you like an outsider, and I've watched David fail to stand up for you, and I've done nothing to change it because I didn't want to rock the boat. What you did with the birthday dinner wasn't revenge, Sarah, it was self-preservation." Robert's validation opened the floodgates for a conversation that transformed both of our understanding of the Harper family dynamics. He admitted that he had been uncomfortable with Margaret's treatment of me for months, but had chosen to avoid confrontation rather than address the problem directly. His own conflict-avoidant personality had contributed to a family culture where Margaret's preferences went unchallenged, even when they were hurtful or unfair. Margaret has always had very specific ideas about what our family should look like. Robert explained, his honesty refreshing after years of walking on eggshells around the topic. "When Jessica married Thomas, it was easy because he came from a similar background and naturally fit into her vision. But you're different, Sarah, and instead of expanding her vision to include you, she's been trying to make you fit into a space that was never designed for who you are." The conversation revealed layers of family dysfunction that had been hidden beneath the Harper family's polished exterior. Robert described years of managing Margaret's expectations and preferences, smoothing over conflicts, and enabling her controlling tendencies in the name of keeping peace. Jessica had learned to navigate her mother's approval by never challenging her decisions, while David had been so sheltered by his golden child status that he genuinely didn't recognize the exclusionary patterns. "What you did last week forced all of us to confront something we've been avoiding," Robert continued. "Margaret has been treating you as a conditional member of this family, someone whose inclusion depends on her mood and preferences. That's not how family should work, and it's not fair to you or to David." Robert's acknowledgement of the problem was healing in a way I hadn't expected. For 3 years, I had been questioning my own perceptions, wondering if I was being too sensitive or expecting too much from David's family. Having someone witness and validate my experience felt like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. But Robert's visit wasn't just about validation. It was about proposing a solution. He suggested a family meeting with a professional counselor, someone who could help the Harper family develop healthier communication patterns and address the underlying issues that had led to the birthday disaster. He had already researched family therapists in our area and was prepared to pay for the sessions himself if necessary. "I don't know if Margaret will be willing to participate," he admitted, "but I think Jessica and David need to understand how their behavior has affected you, and I think you deserve to have your voice heard in a neutral setting. This family is broken, Sarah, and it's going to take work from all of us to fix it." The idea of family therapy felt both hopeful and terrifying. Part of me worried that a professional setting would simply become another forum for the Harper family to pressure me into accepting their treatment and apologizing for my reaction. But Robert's genuine remorse and commitment to change suggested that this might be an opportunity for real transformation rather than just conflict management. That evening, when David came home from work, he found Robert and me sitting at our kitchen table with information about family therapists spread between us. The surprise on David's face quickly gave way to curiosity and then relief as Robert explained his visit and his new understanding of the family dynamics that had led to our current crisis. "Dad, I had no idea you felt that way about Mum's behaviour," David said, looking genuinely shocked by his father's candid assessment of Margaret's treatment of me. "I thought Sarah was just being oversensitive, that Mum needed time to adjust to having a daughter-in-law." Robert's response was gentle but firm. "Son, Sarah has been your wife for 3 years. If your mother still needs time to adjust to her existence, that's not Sarah's problem to solve. That's our problem to address, and it should have been addressed a long time ago." The three of us spent the next 2 hours planning our approach to family healing, discussing how to present the therapy option to Margaret and Jessica, and establishing ground rules for future family interactions. Robert insisted that any future family events would include automatic invitations for me, with no discussion or debate about my worthiness to attend. David agreed to take a more active role in defending our marriage and my place in the family, even when it meant disappointing his mother. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful about the possibility of genuine change in the Harper family dynamics. Robert's courage in confronting uncomfortable truths had created space for honest conversation and real solutions. The birthday disaster had been painful, but it had also forced everyone to acknowledge problems that had been festering beneath the surface for years. The road ahead would require sustained effort from everyone involved, but at least now we were all looking in the same direction instead of pretending the problems didn't exist. Margaret and Jessica would need to confront their own behaviour and attitudes. David would need to learn to prioritise his marriage over his mother's comfort, and I would need to trust that change was possible while maintaining the boundaries that protected my emotional well-being. That night, David moved back into our bedroom for the first time in a week, and we talked until nearly dawn about everything we had learned and everything we hoped to build together. The Harper family celebration I had dreamed of creating might not have happened the way I originally planned, but something even more important had emerged from the ashes of that disaster. The possibility of genuine acceptance and inclusion based on respect rather than accommodation. 6 months later, Margaret's next birthday celebration was a potluck dinner at our house, with everyone contributing something homemade and meaningful. Margaret helped me prepare her grandmother's apple pie recipe, working alongside me in my kitchen and sharing stories about the women in her family who had made the same pie for generations. Jessica's twin boys helped their grandmother arrange flowers from my garden in mason jars, creating centerpieces that were beautiful in their simplicity and authenticity. The professional photographs from that second celebration show a different kind of beauty than the elegant portraits from my Le Bernardin dinner. These photos capture genuine connection, hard-won understanding, and the kind of family love that includes everyone without reservation or condition. Margaret's smile in these pictures is softer and more genuine than any expression I had seen from her in 3 years of trying to win her approval. The family therapy sessions had been difficult and sometimes painful, requiring everyone to examine their own contributions to the dysfunction and commit to new patterns of behaviour. Margaret had to confront her controlling tendencies and learn to extend unconditional acceptance to her son's wife. Jessica had to recognise how her enabling had perpetuated harmful dynamics, and David had to develop the courage to prioritise his marriage, even when it disappointed other family members. For my part, I had to learn to trust that change was possible while maintaining the self-respect and boundaries that had been so hard won during the birthday crisis. The therapy sessions taught me to advocate for myself without attacking others, to express my needs clearly, rather than hoping they would be intuited, and to recognize that healthy family relationships require ongoing effort and commitment from everyone involved. The Harper family I belong to now is different from the one I tried so desperately to join 3 years ago, and it's infinitely better than the polished but excluding version that rejected me. We argue sometimes, we don't always understand each other perfectly, and we still have to work at inclusion and acceptance. But now we're all committed to the work, and no one gets left out when the family gathers to celebrate the people we love. If you've ever felt excluded by your in-laws or struggled to find your place in a family that seemed determined to keep you on the outside, I want you to know that your feelings are valid and your boundaries matter. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth, even when that refusal creates conflict or disappointment. The Harper family celebration I created at Le Bernardin wasn't revenge, it was self-love, and it opened the door to the authentic family relationships I had been seeking all along. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to stand up to in-laws who excluded you from family celebrations? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let me know if you think I was right to cancel the birthday dinner. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life family drama stories, and please share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better from the people who claim to love them. Thank you for listening to my journey from exclusion to acceptance, and remember that sometimes the family you build is more important than the family you marry into.